So I'm going to invite my colleague, Dr. Julia Gamble, who's a assistant professor in the Anthropology Department, to share some of the information about her department and the fantastic things you can learn there. So over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for that introduction. I'm very pleased to be here to speak to you all today and to tell you a little bit about anthropology, which, as Dr. Smith has already noted, is one of the social sciences we have in the Faculty of Arts. So anthropology is quite literally the study of humans. That's what the word means. Basically, we look at every part of humans, biological through to cultural, both in the past and through to the present. So we tend to use analytical methods that examine humans as social beings, and we might engage in more heavily scientific approaches, for example, in terms of core sciences, looking at maybe ancient DNA or proteomics or chemical analyses. And we might also engage with more cultural-based sorts of analysis where we are looking at patterns of religion or how different people interact and social and cultural history. So we really are huge in scope. We are interested in looking at common patterns in the human condition across populations and across cultures. So in this, we are also interested in not only understanding the common patterns, but in understanding any differences. And those differences can tell us something about how humans have adapted to their environment, about the particular cultural or population histories. And that's really important because adaptation and diversity actually provides us with very important tools for moving forward into the future. So in effect, it gives us a very important strength as a species. Anthropology takes what we call a holistic approach, meaning that we recognize that in order to understand humans in all of our complexity, we have to look at the big picture. So this means that anthropologists often look at many different levels, and we will look at many different facets of humans to understand our core research questions. So for example, a biological anthropologist, and I'm going to talk about the different fields in just a minute, but a biological anthropologist might be interested in looking at stress indicators in a skeleton, but they won't understand what those stress indicators mean unless they look at environmental factors for what that person experienced. And a medical anthropologist might be interested in patterns of breastfeeding across populations. So they might want to look at when breastfeeding stops and to understand better why it stops at that point. And they'll need to understand a number of things to get at the answers to these questions. They'll need to understand the resources in the environment. For example, what food resources will be around. And they'll also need to understand cultural perceptions surrounding breastfeeding and possibly even economics. So it's impossible to get at the answers to these questions without taking that broad holistic perspective. So the way anthropologists approach their study means that we really tackle some of the most challenging issues that are around us in the world today. We might be interested in why people engage in conflict and what patterns actually shape how conflict developed, and maybe using cross-cultural perspectives to help resolve conflict. Conflict we might take a biological approach to understand what patterns in human adaptation might shape a predilection to conflict, or we might take a cultural approach to better understand the cultural variables that are shaping it. We might study human adaptation in this very rapidly changing world, or the factors that shape global health on local or global scales. So we might take very close-in perspectives or very broad perspectives. And we might also look at social inequality. This tends to be pretty pervasive in that it interacts with and shapes and is shaped by all of these things. So environmental factors, it shapes global health, and it is something that is heavily embedded in conflict. Okay, so you tend to see social inequality being something that pops up quite a bit. And it therefore permeates many aspects of anthropological study. They're ready for the next slide there. If you are coming to us in anthropology, you have a number of options for degrees. We encompass kind of the scope that you can do across arts. You might want to major in anthropology, and that would be a 3-year major with 90 credit hours. We also have both an advanced and honors anthropology degrees, which both take 4 years at 120 credit hours. And for these, the main difference is that you need slightly higher grades for the honors program. So you would need a GPA of 2 or higher, and you would need a C in the prerequisite course for the advanced, and a C average across all the advanced major required courses. But for an honors, you would need a GPA of 3 or higher, and higher grades in the honors subfields. So you would need to, so that is a primary difference in terms of, what you're taking. The reason you might take an advanced would be it opens doors to a range of other options beyond the major. It does open the door to graduate studies, but also to other professional positions. And honors is what you would want to focus on if you're wanting to go on and do graduate studies like a master's or PhD in anthropology. Next slide, please. I've mentioned some of these subfields already. Just to cap them off, I've mentioned mostly biological or cultural anthropology or sociocultural anthropology, and there are a few other areas. Archaeology is the focus on human past, dealing with material culture, so what humans have left behind. And archaeologists will go into the field and conduct excavations and recover ancient settlements or cemeteries or even things as like mines or bread ovens and things like that. So they will look at food, they will look at technology, and a whole bunch of questions. Anthropological linguistics is the study of languages, and we actually have a separate linguistics department that is independent of anthropology. So while we do have a little bit of linguistics in our department, if you're interested in linguistics, you might want to look at the linguistics department. And each of these subfields has a lot of overlap. So a biological anthropologist may also be an archaeologist, and a sociocultural anthropologist may use archaeology to help understand cultural patterns. So we actually get quite a bit of overlap here, and other subfields like medical anthropology that pulls together these areas. Okay, so quite broad. If you come into anthropology, the first few fields through few courses you might look at would be the archaeology biological anthropology course, which is human origins and antiquity, where we look at human variation, evolution, and adaptation. We look at primates, and we also look at archaeology and the origin of civilizations and agriculture, for example. And in cultural anthropology, Anth 1220, it's a comparative study of human societies, which includes looking at languages, kinship patterns, and things like ritual and belief systems. Next slide, please. So in these, there are a number of really interesting courses: plagues and people, where you study past epidemics, how people have responded to those epidemics, what caused them. And you might tie that together with a more cultural study, the anthropology of illness, where we look at how people understand disease, how they define disease, and how they feel it. There are also very hands-on courses like human osteology, where you actually will work with human bones and learn what we can learn from them, and forensic anthropology, which you might identify with TV programs like Bones, and we go into it on a whole new level. Next slide, please. I think. Thank you. So we have a number of very hands-on things with anthropology. You could engage with a field school where you actually go on an archaeological excavation. We also have a very active field group. I should say that the field schools are both local and international. So we have a range of opportunities, and the Anthropology Students Association will help give you awareness of these opportunities and of some of the other things going on in our department. We have a regular speaker series from both people in the department and internationally. And there are also opportunities through the Undergraduate Research Awards program where you could potentially work with a professor doing some research with them. Next slide, please. So anthropology provides you with a range of skills that are useful in anthropology, but also beyond. And we basically, you could, these are applicable to a range of career sets, which I'll mention in just a second. They broadly give you a knowledge of a whole scope of biological, ecological, and cultural factors so that we can better understand human behavior. They also give you a cross-cultural understanding, which you can take to understand media and things that are going on in the world around you. And they give you skills in social analysis and data analysis, which can be very broadly applicable across areas of study and across job spectrums. So really, we can apply this to jobs both in academia and also things like working in a museum, or even as a social science analyst, which might have applicability in, say, a bank or an insurance company, because it's very important to use the skills like quantitative and qualitative analysis to understand the scope of people you might be working with. So there are a number of jobs that this is applicable to. I'm not going to go through them all. I think I'm probably out of time, but if you have any questions later, I will be very happy to answer them. Okay, thank you all.